भारत का कोहिनूर रहा नहीं, हमसे बिछड़ गया है.
Mr. Tata was really somebody who was very, very humble, very graceful.
Ratan Tata was a great man, a great mind, and a great son of India.
India will miss him greatly.
He was the perfect gentleman and perfect Indian.
Growing up, this day will ever come, where I'd be 6 inches away from someone I feel not every Indian, but every human being ever born and to be born should take inspiration from.
Thank you for putting me at ease. I've been as nervous about sitting 6 inches from you as you have been.
Whenever the economic history of modern India is written, I would feel that a full volume will not be enough to describe his achievements.
I'd like to be remembered as a person who made a difference. Not anything more, not anything less.
Ratan Tata, the man who took India Inc. to the world, the philanthropist who led a modest lifestyle and one of India's tallest business leaders, has passed away at the age of 86. Tributes have been pouring in from across the country and the world. For more than 2 decades, Ratan Tata led the conglomerate, which houses more than 100 companies and clocks an annual revenue of more than $100 billion. But his legacy goes well beyond the businesses he built. After retiring, Ratan Tata supported more than 40 startups, lending his wisdom to budding entrepreneurs. We will speak with some of those entrepreneurs in just a bit. But first, here's Ratan Tata speaking to me in 2021 about supporting young business leaders and how he would like to be remembered.
I would like to be remembered as a person who was able to make a change. Who is able to be responsible for some change in the way we looked at things. What that might be spelt out as, I can't really say, because I have a feeling that that's going to just happen one day, where you become the innovator of something that people have talked about and not done. And you have found that little alley that enables you to do something which people thought was unviable and not possible. That would be an immensely exciting area to be in. And if one could have that satisfaction of saying, I enabled an artificial eye to be created, or I enabled X or Y or Z to happen. That to me, even if it were not financially the most successful, what it brings to the world would be exciting to a person like me.
Well, Ratan Tata there on how he would like to be remembered, as well as the contribution that he made to India's startup ecosystem. Joining me on the program, Abhiraj Singh Bhal, the co-founder and CEO of Urban Company. Also with us, Kunal Behel, the co-founder of Snapdeal and Titan Capital, and Tharun Das, the former Director General of the Confederation of Indian Industry. Gentlemen, appreciate you joining us here on the program. Mr. Das, I will start with you, sir. You've spent many years, in fact decades, not just working with Mr. Tata as part of the Confederation of Indian Industry, but also observing his own growth and evolution as a business leader. As you look back at his life, his time, and the legacy that he leaves behind, Mr. Das, how would you sum up Ratan Tata?
Well, he was a very thoughtful person, Shereen. extremely deep as a person, introverted, not extroverted in any way. Your own interview with him, as you will remember, was somewhat halting because he's thinking of the words to choose to express his thoughts to you. And he made a difference for me first because he took us, CII, into the world. He's the one who led our missions to the US. He took us to the chairman of GE, General Motors, Ford, McDonnell Douglas, and other companies to bring them into India, to invest in India. And they did eventually, you know. And they've had, some of them have done well, some of them may not have done well. But he was the pilot for us for this whole Project India, bring the world into India, take India out into the world. And part of that, of course, was his aspiration for Tatas to first take over Chorus. I remember the night before when he was going into the bidding room, and he called me and he said, you know, I'm going to overbid tonight because I don't want to lose to the Brazilians. I want this company to come to India. And this is not only about Tatas, he said, this is about India. India has to be seen in the world. So this point that he makes about making a change was very deep in his thought process. And he showed it through action, through decisions, not just by talking about it.
Well, you're absolutely right, Mr. Das. In fact, not just taking India to the world, but enhancing India's reputation and image by taking India to the world through some of the acquisitions that you spoke of as well. I'm going to come back to you, sir, in just a second, but let me get Kunal into the conversation, because one of the many contributions that Ratan Tata made through the course of his career, and especially post his retirement, was to try and be an enabler, in his words, to try and enable innovations to happen. He might not have been the innovator himself, but he was trying to support the innovations that were being taken forward by many young startup companies. Some of them are here on the program. Kunal, I'll start by you. We showed a little bit of that clip of you in conversation with Mr. Tata. And, you know, I think one of the things that often is underappreciated about him is his sense of humor, as you yourself pointed out. Take me back to the time when you met Mr. Tata for the first time, made that pitch to him, and got him on board as an investor.
Thanks, Shereen. And it's obviously a very sad day, a day we all knew would come, and unfortunately it has come. But, you know, Mr. Tata single-handedly bridged the gap between traditional India business and the startup world. We don't remember now as a group, but 10 years ago, most Indian businesses almost scoffed at the startup ecosystem, that these are guys who just raise money, burn money, and they're not really adding much to the economy. But he had the foresight to look at the startups in a different way as innovators, as you rightly mentioned, and said, look, what can I do? I can lend my name, I can lend some money in terms of investing in these businesses and support them in whatever they need. I remember my first meeting with him was intermediated by someone we knew in common, and they just told me that an H&I in Mumbai wants to meet you. And they didn't tell me the name till the day before the meeting. And when I landed in Mumbai at night and the meeting was the next morning, they said, it's Mr. Tata. You can imagine the kind of sleep I got that night. And when I showed up at his office the next day, he was running about 5-7 minutes late. And when he came, my heart just stopped, because I'd only seen him on TV and on newspapers and magazines, never seen him in person. And the first thing he did was he just profusely apologized for being late. And I was just wondering, why is he apologizing? He was like 5 minutes late, it doesn't matter. And instead of sitting behind a big desk, a big table, he pulled the visitor's chair and literally just sat right next to me and said, I'd love to learn more about your business. And 25 minutes later, he said, well, I really like what you're doing. I'd love to invest in your business if you would have me. And, in hindsight, you just you don't realize the significance of words until time passes, and the significance of just his humility, his grace, where he didn't make an assumption that just because he is this great man, that anyone he gives money to will take it from him. I mean, they would, but he doesn't assume that. He'd never assume that. And one more interesting story, if I may, Shereen, which was when that meeting ended, he said, "Do you have any questions?" I said, "I just have one request, that whenever you have time, if you can come visit our team and give them a talk." He said, "I will do it." I met him through the years, but logistically, we were never able to make work for him to come. Unfortunately, it's a miss. But 2-3 years ago, I met him at a wedding, and I walked up to him to say hello to him. And he smiled, he looked at me, and the first thing he said is, "I still owe you that trip." That is the greatness of Mr. Tata. He just connects with people at a different level.
Well, there is great strength in gentleness and in kindness, as you pointed out, Kunal. And I think his humility is something that everyone who has interacted with him in even the smallest fashion for even a few moments has felt that. And I think, as Maya Angelou said, it is how you make people feel that they will remember the most. Abhiraj, let me come to you as well. To pick up on what both Mr. Taran Das as well as Kunal were talking about, in many ways, he had the foresight to take risks and to take bets that other people perhaps were not even thinking of. So he was perhaps ahead of the curve, or had the ability to think ahead of the curve. Take me through your own engagement, your first interaction with him, and how you convinced him to come on board Urban Company.
He very much did, Shereen. When we first got the call from his office that Mr. Tata wants to meet you, to put things in perspective, we had not completed our first anniversary as a company. And I think we were either pre-revenue or we had negligible revenues. So we were a very, very small, unproven startup at the time. I recall reaching his office. This was the Elphinstone building in Fort. And I expected a rather large office for somebody of his stature, but it was a humble, perhaps 1,500 or 2,000 square foot office on the second floor, a couple of employees, and then himself. We met him. I think we shared our vision and the idea of Urban Company with him for about 45 to 50 minutes. I remember him patiently listening throughout that pitch and not interrupting at any point in time. Then he spoke words which I still very carefully remember. He said, "Abhiraj, Varun and Raghav, you are building something that India needs. Just make sure that you keep the quality really, really high, and the rest will follow." And very much similar to what Kunal said, he said, "If you would give me the opportunity, I would love to partner with you as a small shareholder." He didn't make the assumption that he could just come in, which just shows his humbleness and his humility. There's a lot to take away from a person like him. I think while it is sad that he is no longer with us, some men they live forever. Their value system, who they represent, I think he in many ways is an embodiment of all the values that India should really strive for, and Indians should really strive for: humility, grace, conscious capitalism, boldness when it matters, many things that I think we draw inspiration from.
Yes, and many will draw inspiration from some of those values and attributes that you just spoke of. Mr. Das, I want to come back to you, sir, and to really talk about some of the bold decisions that were taken by Mr. Tata, as well as while we talk about his gentleness and his kindness, he was also equally decisive in actions that he took, whether it was restructuring the organization or making bold bets. For instance, his passion project, the Nano, which didn't go as per his plan and as per his own expectations. But as I remember him telling us that the biggest risk you can take is not taking any risks. Mr. Das, through the conversations that you had with him over the period of times when some of those crucial decisions were taken, was there ever a sense that you got where there was trepidation, there was nervousness about those decisions being made, but the conviction was so high that he just wanted to follow through?
I'll talk about reforms first, Shereen. When the 1997-98 Southeast Asia financial crisis happened, Indian industry wanted government to slow down on the reform process. And we had that debate internally in CII. There was a strong view that we need to ourselves slow down, push the government to slow down. Ratan was a member of our board. He was a member of our executive board. This is the only organization, as far as I know, industry institution where he was involved. And he just wouldn't have it. He said there's no way that CII can backtrack. CII has to go forward, has to support the government, and we have to go ahead with reforms, and we have to face the competition which is coming because of reforms. He was, as you used the word decisive, he was very decisive, very strong, and almost threatening the other CEOs in the room that, if you guys don't agree with me, I'm going to call it a day. It was that kind of thing. And he carried the day. He carried the day because people respect him. And he gave courage to others that you can face competition. You don't have to be scared of competition. Because competition, if you remember, Shereen, was new to India and Indian industry at that time. So that was one very, very big thing that he did. The second thing that he did was, when the multinationals wanted to come in the 90s, early 90s, they all wanted joint venture partners. And actually, under policy, they had to have joint venture partners. Ratan Tata decided that he would offer Tata partnership to IBM, to Honeywell, to Cummins, and a whole bunch of other companies, not for control, not to have a long-term arrangement with them, but to handhold them into India. And if you look back in history, each one of them amicably separated from Tata, absolutely amicable, Tatas helped them to find their feet in India, and then Tatas said, go on your own, you're comfortable now, you don't need us. That was an amazing. Now, can you tell me one other example of this kind in India, in Indian industry? This guy was just amazing for doing that. And it was a core belief of his that he had to help foreign companies to come here and be successful, because otherwise they would fail and India would be blamed. India would be blamed because we're in a difficult place to do business in. We still are a difficult place. But he's always been the first stop for companies to come there. And most important, they trusted him. And that trust, he never defaulted on. He always had their trust, and he always retained the trust, whether they were his partners or not his partners. It was an amazing story.
Oh, it is absolutely the single most important currency that I think Mr. Tata believed in was trust. And I believe the ethics and values, I remember him saying in an interview that he did with us in 2018 that the group will change in its complexion, in its aspirations. But I hope that what it will retain is its integrity, its ethics and its values. Kunal, to pick up on what we just heard there from Mr. Das, and I think that's a very important point, because this ability to to forge partnerships holds the Tata Group in great stead even today, whether it's the joint venture with Tata, Starbucks, or it is the joint venture across the gamut of the defense ecosystem. The Tatas, as Mr. Das pointed out, are the first port of call for multinationals who are looking at an Indian partner. But Kunal, coming back to the courage of conviction, and as I said, whether it was Chorus or it was Jaguar Land Rover or it was Nano, there are many such instances where the belief that Mr. Tata had was so strong, but he did not allow or didn't allow the failure or the disappointment to deter taking further risks. Now, that's a very important ingredient for entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship. Is that something that you have taken away from his story and his legacy?
Shereen, that and many other things. I remember, we were having a low point in in journey of entrepreneurship and building businesses. You have low points and high points. In one of my low points, I did go to him and I asked him for advice. He asked a lot of good questions. I think the great thing about Mr. Tata was his ability to zoom into a situation and then quickly zoom out. So the context switching he was able to do instantly really helped him to understand the situation and then give very relevant advice. One of the things he did mention in the context of forging long-term relationships is, often a lot is spoken about his grace and wisdom, etc. But he was also very clear with his principles, and he would make them be known. This was a time when he had been investing in the startup ecosystem for a few years, and he had some observations by then. And I asked him, what are your observations? And he said, look, one of the things I've learned is that this world of investors and investments is far more transactional than he ever imagined. And he said that one of my life's greatest learnings has been that if you stay transactional, you'll never achieve anything great. And to really achieve something great or build something of consequence over a long period of time, which is enduring and lasting, you have to build relationships, lean on relationships, stick with your relationships through thick and thin. It's a very valuable lesson for startups, founders, and particularly for investors whose nature of business by design is transactional in nature. A very, very, very important learning for me now as also an investor, but a big learning for everyone in our new age economy ecosystem as well.
Abhiraj, let me get you to comment on that. What do you take away as the most valuable lesson from Ratan Tata's life and legacy? And were there any points during the course of your conversations with him where he gave you advice that you follow through on?
I think, Shereen, as you rightly said, and as others have opined, as an entrepreneur, there will be multiple points in the company building journey when, you really have to dig deep into your own conviction and build what you think is right. And often the path will not, will probably be contrarian to popular wisdom, and there are times when you'll be proven wrong, and that's the risk that one has to take as an entrepreneur. We've had 2 or 3 such major instances, including pivoting our entire business early on from an open marketplace to a fully controlled, full stack, quality controlled marketplace model. This was certainly something I had discussed with him, even at the time when he was making the investment, that this is something I intend to do, because I don't see this current model shaping up in the right direction. However, the popular wisdom is that a light touch, asset light, technology only model is the only scalable model. Of course, we went through some difficult periods even during COVID as a company, and there have been several ups and downs. I think net, one of my big takeaways is that he was always somebody who believed in his own conviction and taking really bold decisions. and it was a different kind of boldness. It was a boldness and an assertion that came from a place of self-assurance, self-belief. It was not bravado. It was a sort of almost silent boldness in his decision making, and he took, as you said, very bold decisions. Some of them didn't work out. Nano didn't work out, but many of his deals did. Jaguar Land Rover did. Chorus did. That's, I think, the biggest lesson for all of us as entrepreneurs. We will often find ourselves at crossroads where perhaps everybody in the boardroom doesn't believe in your decision making. Are you seeking at that point in time consensus? Or are you seeking your own inner voice, your own conviction to pursue the path that you want to pursue?
Mr. Das, I'll give you the final say, sir, since you spent the most amount of time with Mr. Tata, amongst many of his peers. As you pointed out, he was an introvert, but also interestingly and ironically, he was one of the first few from corporate India to actually get onto social media platforms like Twitter and then also Instagram and post quite frequently there. Mr. Das, it's a big loss for corporate India. It's a big loss for the nation. But, how would you like to remember Ratan Tata? All the things that we've spoken of in terms of his qualities, what he will be remembered for. But in terms of the legacy that he leaves behind, what would you like to remember him for?
He believed in long-term relationships. The two gentlemen who've just spoken, I think, reflect that. Once he is committed to you, he is committed to you. He went through cases, Shereen, where he was let down, but he never let it stop him from still going ahead supporting people and supporting the people he believed in, people he trusted. And that was a great quality which we will miss, because he was unique in that respect. He was an empowerer of people, and he was not a taker, he was a giver in every way. Not just funds, but his caring for whether it's his dogs or his staff or his employees after the 26/11 in Bombay. There's so much that he did which you don't know about. The cancer hospitals that he set up around India, because there was only one cancer hospital in Bombay, and he goes and sets up a cancer hospital in Calcutta. He wanted to do something for Bengal. Therefore, the plant in Bengal, which the chief minister and others were so keen on, but was stopped by agitation by the current chief minister. And nobody, that's my home state, nobody in the corporate sector is willing to invest big in Bengal, Shereen, because if Tatas cannot be trusted with their investment, how can anybody else? I mean, Tatas are unique. Everybody else is seen to be ordinary in comparison. So, and he built that. He went there to help, and he was pushed back, but he never spoke against West Bengal. He never. I mean, there are other companies of the Tata Group operating in Bengal. They're still operating there. They're still growing there. But unfortunately, the really flagship project which have turned West Bengal's industrial fortunes could not happen. And he was deeply hurt by that. But again, introvert, reclusive, keeps it to himself, doesn't speak out about his pain, and that was a very unique feature about him. I mean, he's a very special person. If I have one more minute, I'll say something about. I met him at a dinner by Dr. Manmohan Singh, when Prime Minister for Obama, and he greeted me warmly, and he says, "I finished my new house in Bombay. You must come and see it." I said, "Yeah, sure." So we fixed a date, and I went down. He said, "You have dinner with me." He took me around the house, which he had designed. So it was all his personal pride. This is the architect in Ratan Tata, coming in. This was his first love always. And then we sit down together. He's a teetotaler, so it's only Coke, but he offers you alcohol if you want to have. And I said, "Ratan, how long have you been here?" He said, 6 months. I said, "So when was the housewarming party?" He said, "Housewarming party?" He said, "You're the second person to step into this house. this is the guy, and the home is so simple, the furniture and everything is so simple and so kind of a low key that this is the man, and this is the man who is an amazing role model for all of us going forward.
Absolutely, an extraordinary life and an extraordinary gentleman, Ratan Tata, the empowerer and the enabler. Thank you very much, Tarun Das, Kunal Behel and Abhiraj Bal for joining us here on this special program as we pay tribute to one of India's stalwarts, a son of India that will be sorely and deeply missed. Thank you very much for your time. We are going to head into a break, but before that, TCS has just announced its second quarter results. My colleague Reema Tendulkar is standing by with the details. Reema, of course, TCS has also been one of Mr. Tata's passion projects. And today, unfortunately, on the day that he has passed, TCS delivering its numbers. Take us through them.
Well, for starters, there's a margin miss. So margins for the company versus expectation of an expansion have declined by 80 basis points. So EBIT margins at 24.1% fall short of the CNBC-TV18 poll of 24.9%. And margins have now contracted for the second consecutive quarter. In Q4 of FY24, margins were at 26%. They dropped in the prior quarter to 24.7% because of a wage hike, and they further declined. Now, this margin drop is a bit surprising because typically in Q2, margins go up on a quarter-on-quarter basis because of the absence of a wage hike. This time, the street said, well, maybe we won't have a margin expansion because there is a large BSNL deal which is contributing to the company's top line, and that is expected to be at lower margins. So therefore, margins could be flattish. But margins have fallen by 80 basis points. Margins have come under pressure for the second consecutive quarter, missing our poll by 80 basis points, and on a quarter-on-quarter basis too, margins are under pressure. So that's reason number one. Secondly, and this is driving a miss in the company's profitability. So profits have also fallen by 1.1%. Now coming to the top line, the company's dollar revenue growth has gone up by 2.2% in line with estimates. The estimates were for a 2% kind of an increase. So revenue growth is very much intact. But the growth here is driven largely by India. Now, India is a very small, market for the company. Its contribution to the top line stands at just 8.9%. But India revenues have gone up by 21% quarter-on-quarter and 95% on a year-on-year basis. And here it's that mega BSNL deal which the company is executing, which is driving the company's top line. So nearly 70%, 72% to be precise, of the incremental quarter-on-quarter revenue growth is courtesy India. And India, remember, is not a large contributor to the top line at just 8.9%. The other markets, North America has come under pressure. That's down 3.5%. So that's disappointing. UK and continental Europe, though, has grown. The other important thing is, before we get to the guest, is BFSI continues to show traction. Last quarter, BFSI growth on a sequential basis was 0.6%. This quarter, BFSI recovery continues and the growth stands at 1.9%. Deal wins are similar to last quarter, $8.6 billion quarter-on-quarter versus $8.3 billion. Hiring continues. Attrition has been stable. Sandeep Agarwal, fund manager at Sovilo Investment Managers, now weighs in with his first thoughts. Sandeep?
Hey, hi, good evening, and thanks for having me on the show. So, Reema has already, summed up quite well, but I would like to add a couple of things. One, while there is a negative in terms of in the details of the revenue that, most of the growth has come from India, but there is also a positive that BFSI has started turning around. And I would also say that, there is some positive if you read into the attrition data also, that, it has gone up by 20 basis points. So in a way, lower attrition is always good for margins for the company, but also at 12%, if it had gone down, then there was also a risk that, people are building in a lot of cautiousness on the US hard landing of the economy. So I think from that perspective, it looks slightly better. And also the commentary, if you see from TCS CEO, they have said that he has clearly mentioned that the growth markets are doing well and BFSI recovery is a positive surprise. So I think overall there is a slight miss in the margins, and the positive surprise on the revenue is not coming from the high margin markets or the developed markets. So while the numbers are broadly in line or slightly lower. I would say that in the details, there are few things which are suggesting that the worst is behind for the sector and the company also. Having said so, I would say the kind of run-up which the stock has seen, I think from here to make more money in near term will be quite challenging.
You know, what's surprising to me is that BFSI revenues have gone up by 1.9%, but North America is down 3.5%. So, you know, despite BFSI probably doing well for America, the overall North America revenues have come under quite a bit of pressure. So that's a bit concerning. But Prakash is also now joining in. Prakash, you know, I think what the street was awaiting is that any signs in the numbers, in the commentary to suggest that the recovery is underway, if not in Q2, but at least in the subsequent quarters. Do the numbers give you confidence that, justify the rally that the IT stocks have already seen and give you confidence that there could be further upside in IT stocks?
So, Rima, I think a couple of, answers or ways to answer your questions. The first is, I don't think the rally that we've seen in the IT stocks is justified. And then it's too early to call whether this is across the board, across the sector. But the TCS numbers very clearly tell you a story that while BFSI started to look up, and there could be much more in terms of new order wins from that segment, it's too early right now to celebrate. And India continues to contribute, as you rightly pointed out. And even within that, BSNL is more of a back-ended margin-driven, assignment. So that's going to be something which we've understood. It's not going to be very margin accretive. But I don't think post the Fed rate cut, things have changed dramatically in terms of clients wanting to look at larger orders or a bigger share of work getting done by these majors. It could still take some time, and closer to December is when you probably start seeing that happen. So it's a bit too early for that to be celebrated. But this set of numbers does tell you, as Sandeep rightly pointed out, that there could be a bottoming out. Things can't get worse than this. So there's probably, from a timing and a quantum perspective from the revenue and profitability, there seems to be a bottoming out at play. And then the next quarter would definitely start looking better. But again, normally it's a weak quarter given the furloughs, and also I would read too much into that. But bottoming out, yes. Building up hopes, not yet.
Thank you, gentlemen. We're going to keep the conversation short today, but thank you for joining in. Slip into a very short break. We'll come back with more.